Hey everybody, good morning. It's Pete. How's it going? Welcome to Stock Trading Pro. Today's Stock Market Live, we have a ton of stuff to talk about. The stock market got hit pretty hard Friday morning after Thursday's short-term sell-off and recovered towards the end of the day, which really messed up a lot of sell short opportunities. And we're actually getting follow through today. So S&P futures are actually up right now slightly, but there's a lot of stuff to talk about today. We're going to talk about the Chinese electric vehicle stock, specifically which stock is the best stock to buy now, Tesla versus XPEV, XPeng. We're also going to talk about Twitter. We're going to talk about Starbucks. There's a lot of stuff on the plate right now. And then we're actually going to do a breakdown of the stocks that meet the perfect criteria heading into this week and the breakdown of those sectors and which sectors we should be focusing on right now. Energy sector has really lost its mojo. It's been mostly what we call melted candles, where there really hasn't been that much momentum. Healthcare has actually perked up a little bit. We're going to go over a few of those stocks in addition to looking at the Chinese electric vehicle stocks. We have a bunch of stuff to talk about. We're also going to map out something that I love to do on Monday on the Stock Market Lives, is what we expect to have happen during the week and what would increase our conviction level in whichever stocks we're looking to buy, and what would change that conviction level. That's actually another big part of trading too, is knowing what you want, but also knowing when it changes. And I think when the stock market changes, I think that's where a lot of traders get into trouble, because number one, they either don't know what it needs to look like, or number two, they do and they don't take action anyway. So we have a bunch of stuff to talk about today. So if you're wondering what are the best stocks to buy now, and especially this week, we're going to cover that this week. So stick around and we'll be back in 1 second. Okay, so thank you so much for joining me here every day. I really appreciate it. Today's Stock Market Live is going to be a good one. I'm going to head right over to the charts really quickly. We're going to talk right away about the futures. So futures are actually up right now about 8 points, but I want to talk about the rally that we had in the market at the end of the day. You see this 2-day move to the downside right in this area over here. Definitely got screwed up a little bit, where this looked like it was going to be a pullback that was going to have the market close on the lows. And not only did we not close on the lows, we actually rallied way back up to where we almost had what we call a bullish U-turn. Not quite, but that rally at the end of the day is kind of setting up what we see in stock prices right now. So interesting way that the market ended. A lot of people are, especially in our community, our Discord community, we spent a lot of time talking about end of quarter and what that meant for the rally after the Fed, and whether or not we were going to see selling as late as possible into the end of the quarter. We saw a little bit on the 31st. We saw a little bit heavier on the 1st, but buyers stepped back into the stock market at the end of the day, and we're actually seeing that kind of follow through. So we have a bunch of stuff we're going to talk about. Obviously, everything we talk about is for educational purposes. It's up to you to make that final decision. So let's work our way over into what we said we were going to discuss today. Let's start out with XPEV stock versus Tesla. Actually, that's really the big thing we want to talk about here. I want to get this off the screen. So obviously, if you didn't see the news, this is what came out on Friday. Deliveries triple and the stock jump. So if you don't, triple's a big number. We didn't just barely beat it. Triple what was expected is a big, big number. The market kind of digested it over the weekend. There's a whole other black cloud around Chinese stocks in general. This is hard to ignore. And actually now the stock is up pretty big, and a bunch of other stocks. So we got a bunch of questions about what price and that kind of stuff. What are we looking at? I believe right now there's a 34% upside in a trade in XPEV right now. And you weigh the percentage possible moves of XPEV versus what Tesla stock could be doing, I'm going to be leaning a little bit more towards XPEV right now, maybe even building up a little bit of a bigger position if it holds the $30. That's the big thing we want to talk about right now. So this is a big deal, but the price that we want to talk about is the $30 level. So if we zoom this out, this has been the level that we've been watching basically for about a week and a half. And we're actually above that level right now. You can see that we're actually at 30.57, but we were actually up much higher earlier today. So I want to be clear about this, because sometimes these conversations get confused and whatnot. But if we're talking about price action, we're talking about the best stocks to buy now, we are very clear that it needs to maintain a price when it has a large gap. So we're actually going to talk about Twitter today. We're probably going to talk a little bit about eBay, believe it or not. For me, XPEV needs to hold $30. So I'm going to be looking to initiate the first piece of a swing trade today. As long as it opens above 30, holds that for a certain amount of time today, and then I'm going to be looking to put that position on with just below 30, probably around 29 as the stop that I'm going to be looking for. If it does, here's the chart points that I'm going to be looking for if it can get through there. This is the first obvious level getting up to here because that's the last place that sellers did something significant. So basically right around $40. So we're looking at a move from basically 30 to 40. That's a pretty decent move. Now you compare that from a percentage to what Tesla would need to do. Now, Tesla obviously is up a little bit this morning. We're going to talk about Elon Musk in a second. But this pause right here is actually pretty perfect. If you remember last week, we had that big double inside candlestick after it pushed up and paused. But then we had this big gap after that, and it kind of ruined the risk reward on a new swing trade. And we said it needs to pause in order for us to manage the risk looking for another one. Well, Tesla stock actually did pause, and it's resting at a very clean bull flag right now. So here's the deal. If we take a look at where Tesla is now and what it would need to do to travel that same distance from here to here, that's a 10% move. Okay, so I don't know if you could clearly see that, but that's basically a 10% move heading back up to where sellers came in a couple of times versus XPEV. And if we do that same calculation from basically where we are now up to where the sellers came in, that's roughly 34%. So the same type of move versus the same percentage move is not really the same percentage. So right now, based on the percentage of the ROI that I could get on the trade, I like XPEV a little bit better right now. XPEV, XPeng stock, as opposed to Tesla. We're talking about a swing trade. We're not talking about long-term investment. We're talking about putting the money to work this week and maybe even over the next 10 days, depending on how long it would take to get to that level. So that's the trade that I'm building out right now. So if you happen to not have been trading these electric vehicle stocks, it's very important to actually have other stocks from that industry group in a watch list so you can actually see the order flow going into those stocks. And I just want to take a step back for 1 second. We got a good question last week in our community where I spend a lot of time talking about order flow, but maybe sometimes I don't actually explain what order flow is. So to give you a little bit of a backstory, hey, Ed, good morning. Haven't seen you in a while. Good morning. How's it going? When I had my trading firm in New York City, we at one point, if you don't know, the floor of the New York Stock Exchange changed their execution platform and how orders were placed. Prior to what became the hybrid system, there was SuperDot. And essentially, SuperDot was you place orders at the floor of the exchange with a New York Stock Exchange specialist, and they had protection, basically. So what ended up happening is you could only buy on one side of the market electronically every 30 seconds, and the maximum share size was 1,099 shares. So let's just use an example. Let's say Dustin is a specialist on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange, and let's say that Cynthia wants to electronically buy stock from him. So Cynthia at that point can only do 1,099 shares electronically against Dustin as the specialist. But once that changed and everything became electronic, then Dustin had unlimited exposure electronically. So instead of Cynthia needing to wait 30 seconds to buy more electronically, she then could do it in an unlimited fashion, which is basically the market that we have now, where a lot more stuff is being done electronically, if not most of it. I believe the number is something like 75% of the orders that get traded now are electronic, even on the floor. So what ended up happening was all of those people that were on the floor of the exchange basically lost their jobs. They really didn't need them anymore. So whether it's specialists, clerks, floor brokers, all of those kind of people ended up coming off the floor. So to make a really long story into a short one, those specialists and brokers and clerks came up and traded in my office, which was at 457th Avenue in New York City. We were right next to Penn Station, right across the street from Macy's. So they came up. We were NASDAQ traders at that time, and we mostly traded NASDAQ. And we were really good at trading momentum. We were really good at reading the tape. They taught us that order flow were the large orders that institutions sent down to the floor, and they got paid commissions to work those orders, the order flow, around VWAP as much as possible. The closer that they got their fills on that order flow around VWAP, they got more order flow, and that's how that they understood how big orders get worked over days, weeks, and months, which ultimately is what became the New York method. So that's order flow. I keep talking about order flow every day, but I don't know if I've ever really explained it like that. So we learned, and hopefully you're learning from me, how to track the order flow from 1 hour to the next, 1 day to the next, 1 week to the next. And when you stack that order flow together, you don't see charts anymore. Now you see price action where real money was committed to move that stock up or down. And specifically, obviously, talking about a stock that's a buying opportunity. So when we talk about order flow and order flow stacking in the sense that we do it, you want to visualize somebody actually spent real money to pay higher prices and hold the higher price. So you see a higher high and a higher low on the chart. Then the next part of that order flow stacking is you want to see how long they've been doing it and what kind of volume traded within that. So that's where order flow stacking and tape reading come in, and they're kind of like peanut butter and jelly, the perfect way of reading price action. So if I didn't explain that in that much more detail, I apologize. But sometimes you kind of take stuff. Sometimes it's such a part of you, you just assume some of it's known. But I think if you take nothing out of that, I think the most interesting part about it, which is really what gives us the absolute conviction when we're watching order flow and tracking and piggybacking the order flow, is those floor brokers specifically, they got paid for that order flow. So when they did a good job of managing the order flow and getting as many transactions around VWAP, the volume weighted average price for that day that the order went down there, those big buyers came back to them and said, okay, you did a great job filling that. Here's more order flow. So we combined what we did as NASDAQ traders, which was momentum trading, and what they did reading the order flow. And that's where stacking the order flow comes from, and the New York method. So if you never heard that story before, I think it's kind of cool. A lot of people might not have known that I had an office in New York City. So when we look at these kind of things, which we're actually going to break down some of these ideas right now, that's what it means to stack the order flow. Then you need to learn how to trade after that. Spotting an idea, reading a map and driving safely, two different things. But I think it's kind of interesting because at the very least, if you understand how to find good ideas or ideas that have a high probability of moving in their favor, when you're looking at the stock market, like, okay, I know that's not what I'm looking for versus, yeah, that's it. Then it's just a question of timing your entries, which is the last part of what we do, which we call risk reversal, which is the optimal entry. So if you're new to the channel, that's kind of the stuff that we do every day. So we're looking at the charts and stuff like that. That's the context of what we're looking at. So if you're new, also do me a favor, make sure you click down and click subscribe so you get updates, because we always have new education coming out as well. Okay, so taking that into consideration, now we just went over those percentage moves in XPE versus NEO. But one thing that's pretty interesting, and you can see we're down here right around 30, 55, somewhere in that area right there. We don't have order flow. So if we look at on the weekly charts, we had a pretty good week over here, which we call a bullish U-turn because it traded down, reversed. But then we basically had two melted candle weeks. So again, if you're new to our channel, if you're new to what we do, there's only two candlesticks that we teach that are really, I believe, the only thing you really need to know. I mean, there's hundreds of books on candlestick chart patterns, but when it really comes down to it, we want to make a fast decision of what we're looking at. So there's energy candlesticks or there's melted candlesticks. Energy candlesticks have a big body, which means there's a big difference between where it opened and where it closed. If it has good volume on that, even better. So that means somebody with big money did something powerfully because it opened down here and closed all the way up here, and it's a big green or a big red candle. It happens to be the other way around. So you have a little bit of conviction that something significant happened. Now, that could be on a 5-minute candle, a 1-hour candle, a 1-day candle, 1 week. So that's part of stacking the order flow. We had somebody last week, I don't know if Mike Milano is on the call right now, but we were breaking down, looking at either the daily or the weekly or the monthly. And he basically said, which one do we watch? And you watch all of them. It's an unfolding process. Again, I'll keep going back to driving. It's unfolding. You're going to end up in the same, wherever you plan on getting, but it's unfolding as you drive. Sometimes it's 80, sometimes it goes stop and go, and then, that kind of stuff. So you need to put these pieces together, and this is why game planning every day matters. You're putting the pieces together as the day, the week, and the month is unfolding. So we go back to XPEV and we look at the order flow. This is pretty good, right? A lot of stuff happened there. It's a reversal momentum candlestick. But then that one's the second kind of candlestick that we talk about, which is a melted candlestick. So a melted candlestick right now basically means that it traveled a whole bunch of distance, but has a smaller body, which means that there was a lot of indecision. So if you could just take a daily candlestick, if you have a small body on that candlestick, that means it traded 6.5 hours and opened and closed at basically the same spot. So there's not clarity, which means there's indecision. So energy candlesticks can give you a little bit of conviction indecision candlesticks or melted candlesticks is not as obvious, and usually those are reversals or a pause. So bringing that over to the candlesticks here in XPEV, this reversal was awesome. It reversed 3 weeks of selling. Then we had indecision, and then we had the news last week about the deliveries. So what we are looking for right now this week to start to get a little bit bigger, I guess you would say, or have a little bit more conviction, we're looking for XPEV to go well bid on the week. Now, this is really what you need to learn how to do as a trader if you want your conviction level to be sky high, is you need to say, here's what I expect to have happen today. Here's what I expect to have happen this week. And I'm going to tell you why. If you don't know what you're looking for, if you don't know what is best case scenario, you don't know when to be aggressive, but you also don't know when that changes to change your mind or scale back out of the position. That's probably one of the biggest things that challenges most people, is that they have lack of clarity of what they expect to happen. Too many people are like, I'm just going to see what happens in the market this week, and if it works out, it works out. That's not how professional traders act. Professional traders are always looking to allocate their capital, but they're also willing to hit the bricks if it's not following through in the way that they want. So if XPEV follows through, stays above 30, and we see this week an energy candlestick and obviously is well bid. So energy is one thing where it's a big green candlestick. Well bid means higher highs and higher lows. So now we have 5 days of order flow. So going back to what we said before about order flow, 5 days of order flow where buying pressure stayed there. So if it's 5 days versus 5 minutes, 5 days has a lot of buying, that a lot of real money was spent. So that's what we're going to be looking here. So right now we're looking at the initial piece because we're just starting to see the order flow turn around. If this week finishes well bid and strong, that'll give us more conviction to look to start adding to this trade. So if you don't know some of the other stocks in that group as well, we've talked about them. Let me go back over to the daily chart. So obviously Tesla stock is the big dog there. We got some news about Elon Musk in a minute. So these are the ones you need to have in a watch list. So Tesla, we just talked about XPeng stock, XPEV. Obviously, NEO, not recognizing it as strong as the other one was, but you can see it's very similar price action. For those of you that are a classic chartist, you can see we have an inverse head and shoulders bottom here, which is usually a bullish pattern. Let's see if that can get above 23 and stay there. It's kind of like right there. LI is the other one that we've been keeping an eye on, has not been moving, but you need to have all of them in your watch list. Now, obviously, there's the American electric vehicle companies or car companies in general. So you got Ford, General Motor, but probably RIVN and Lucid are probably two of the more popular ones that people are trading right now. But I want to be clear right now, based on reading the tape, based on the order flow, I'm going to be watching XPEV this week and specifically over the next month or so. If we continue to see the order flow stepping up, for me, XPEV is one of the best stocks to buy now. And I actually feel like it's one of the easier stocks for me to read. That's actually another conversation that we had in our community last week about some stocks you could read like the back of your hand, and other stocks give you the back of the hand where you just can't read them no matter what you do. And that's actually something you need to pay attention to. You need to start working your list of stocks and find which stocks are the best stocks for you to buy, the top stocks for you to buy every day. Some you make money in, some you don't. You kick out the ones you don't, you put new ones in there, and then you build your own little list that's your own personal ATM. And that's a big part of trading. And I know Mike had asked that question last week. It takes a little bit of time. You have to start with some stocks, see how you do, take them out, put a couple more in there. But even if it takes a couple of months, you end up having this nice little basket of stocks that you feel confident that you could make money in on a regular basis, simply because you learn how those stocks trade. So we're going to work over to some other news right now, which was obviously the Twitter news and Elon Musk. Elon Musk is just everywhere right now. Just amazing from an entrepreneurial perspective. So up 25% this morning on the stake, which is ironic considering that he had some bad things to say about it about a week and a half ago. So I want to talk about Twitter and I want to talk about eBay, both of these stocks, because they've recently shown some decent order flow. But let's sit over here and talk about Twitter, and we're actually going to break it down more on the order flow like we just talked about. So again, we have this longer term move to the downside. 3 weeks ago went well bid, 2 weeks ago went well bid, and last week went well bid. So if you keep using the lessons that we're talking about immediately put them into action. The last 3 weeks in Twitter broke that downtrend, that bearish order flow, and now we have 3 weeks of bullish order flow even prior to the news coming out of Elon Musk announcing the size of his position in Twitter. But more importantly, what we both want to know is, how do we trade this today? Well, we've seen a lot of stocks that have had these big bullish gaps recently that have not held the bid. So we've been telling everybody, this is the line in the sand that I'm going to be watching. Whatever price it opens, it's got to be above there in order for me to be wanting to be a buyer and get in there with a little more share size. So now you have to ask yourself, this is kind of after the fact. It's already gone up 3 weeks in a row. And now after a 3-week rally, the stock is gapping up 25%. So with all of that in the equation, is the fact that Elon Musk having that big of a stake in the company going to make the stock go up after a 3-week rally, after a 23% gap this morning? Ask yourself before you just get in there, if you're day trading it specifically, or even swing trade, but ask yourself if after all of that, does it make sense now to buy it, or is now sell the news? I'll just say it right now. I think it's going to be a sell the news event. I think that it's done what he already did. I think that we already rallied 3 weeks into that. And I believe that we're not going to hold the bid today. So we'll see. Now, that's my trading thesis. That's my thought process for putting the pieces together. So if we go to the charts and we map this out, and we obviously broke this big move to the downside, we now actually have a few weeks of buying. And now the stock is up here at 48 and change. So it is literally all the way up here after the stock has already rallied for a few weeks, right at the level that where sellers came in last time. So again, am I 100% going to be right today? I don't care. I only know that that's my argument for the trade, where I'm building the argument for it's already rallied prior to this happening. The news has come out already right now. If it opens up at this 48.50 level and stays there, I'll consider some short-term trades, but the odds are it's not going to follow through today. Now, am I hedging? No, I'm planning. There's a big difference between the two. If it opens higher, if Twitter opens higher, stays up at that 48.50 level, and we see follow-up buying, it's going to have a lot of volume today, that's for sure. If we see follow-up buying, I'll look to actively day trade it, get involved aggressively as day trades, because you can manage those day trades on a little bit tighter window. You have volume, you have volatility. It's awesome. But because it's 3 weeks after the fact that the buying started, 3 well-bid weeks and a giant bullish gap this morning, if I start to look for buying opportunities and it does not hold the opening price, does not hold the VWAP, and starts to trade down, I'll just leave it alone. I'm not going to short sell it. I'll be looking at some other ideas to short sell, which, by the way, if the market rolls over today, you should be saying you should already have a list of ideas to short sell. For me right now, it's financial stocks and home builder stocks. So I'm just going to walk you through a couple of those ideas right now, specifically Lennar. You can see down there as well, Pulte Homes also down there, and KBH, I believe, was the other one that we were looking at. And if we could see Citigroup and Morgan Stanley. So again, if you think about what I'm talking about right now, we're talking about ideas on the long side of the market. If the market rallies, we're talking about if the market goes down, already having a list of stocks to be a short seller of. Now, one of the other groups that is a big list of stocks that have what we call bullish U-turns today, where they traded higher for a few weeks, pulled back, and on Friday reversed, is the energy sector. Now, the energy sector has not been producing any kind of momentum recently, but there's the kind of area that needs to be in your watch list. So I just want to give you a couple of ideas of stocks that I'm going to be watching for today specifically. And this trade is only valid for today based on Friday's price action. So this is one of the best stocks to buy now for me today. Okay, so we're going to take a look at, obviously, Lulu, believe it or not, meets that criteria. Okay, so Lulu actually had some pretty good price action. You can see Friday, it traded below Thursday and rallied back. So Lulu meets that criteria. J&J, as we talked about before, that's actually a really clean picture. So the question that I get is, what is the entry? The entry for me is above Friday's high, and the stop loss is just below Friday's low. So Lulu, J&J, ABBV. So a couple of stocks we talked about before in the healthcare area, and Allstate. Allstate actually was another one that barely traded below Friday, but this is a really good clean bull flag that we're looking for some follow through as well. So there's a bunch of ideas on both sides of the market. And I want to first, obviously, we just talked about Twitter. We have a couple of questions today about Howard Schultz. If you didn't know, the former 13-year CEO stepped down. Howard Schultz is coming back. So here's the thing about Starbucks now. And let's actually take a look at the chart of Starbucks first before we dive into the conversation. Okay. If you remember, if you're a regular viewer of the channel, you know that we were looking over here. We were looking for this breakout. It did not happen. It got hammered, really, absolutely hammered. And now the stock actually looks like it's coming off the bottoms. You got a bullish gap here, a bullish gap here. But here's the big thing about what we read about Howard Schultz. Now, we've talked about stock buybacks quite a bit recently, basically saying that stock buybacks work very similar to quantitative easing on the bigger market, where there's a constant bid under the market. The news that we just read about Howard Schultz is that he's going to stop the stock buyback and start investing more in R&D. So if you're looking to be an investor in, now not trading, we're talking about investing. If you're looking to invest in Starbucks right now, and you've heard the news that they are no longer going to be allocating that money to buy stock back, but they're going to take that same money and put it into R&D, that's a longer time horizon to get an ROI on that. So that's not immediate short-term bullish for that stock. And that's really the way to look at it right now. So you can actually see that the stock is trading down 260. So you would think that with him coming back and starting today, it would be a big move to the upside. But the decision that he made is not being viewed as bullish. And quite frankly, it shouldn't be. So the other part we want to talk about today is these guys. Obviously, the bill passed the House of Representatives, still has to go through the Senate. So we spent a lot of time talking about Tilray and specifically CGC on Friday of last week, and mostly talking about what we were looking to do in Tilray. And if you remember, we mentioned these couple of ideas over here, where this one rallied and didn't hold. This one rallied and did not hold. This one did. We put on a small position here. It came back, and we ended up taking a very small loss on it, I believe. So now we have the same thing over here. So we had a bunch of conversations about Tilray stock and CGC stock. I know there's a whole bunch of other ones, but those are the two that I primarily focus on. And again, they're not normally stocks that I trade. I very rarely trade these kind of news stories. I very rarely trade anything under $10. But a lot of members of our Discord community are talking about it. So it was a big conversation last week. And if you didn't happen to watch last Friday's video, essentially what we talked about was, because we've gotten involved and seen twice the stock has rallied. And again, I'll put that out on the chart again for you. Rallied and pulled back, rallied, pulled back, held the breakout. So we got involved here, added when it took out this level and came back. So we took a small loss. So a very similar price action, very similar conversations. Again, these are the two stocks that I'm mostly focusing on, Tilray and CGC. It's a different trade. So we want to talk about trading order flow versus you're hoping for a bill to get passed in the Senate is a completely different idea. It's a completely different trading strategy. It's like making pizza versus making hamburgers. They're not the same strategy. They're both valid strategies to consider putting your capital into these ideas. But for me, and a couple of people had asked me about this over the weekend, not normally the kind of trade that I would take, because I like consistent, predictable order flow so that I could get in there with size or get in there with conviction. Because when you have consistency, go back to what we talked about before, energy candlesticks on a daily, weekly, and monthly basis that are mostly larger green or large red candlesticks, if you understand short selling, those are the ideas that I tend to like to trade. And if we look at the chart of Tilray, it doesn't usually have that. It has mostly melted candles, which you can see here. And when it does have large green candlesticks, it has not followed through. And you can see bullish gap and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 melted candles, and then 2 candles of selling after it passed the House. So I'm not looking to trade this right now. And I'm not saying anybody else should or should not. I'm giving you my thought process of when I scale up or want to get into something, I need to see a little bit more reliability. So the way I feel right now is a lot of people are guessing whether or not it's going to pass the Senate. And if you do, awesome. I hope you make a lot of money. It's just not something that I would normally do. I like to do the other kind of stuff that we're talking about. And I'm not saying either one's right or wrong. I want to be clear about that. Everybody has their own strategy and style and that kind of thing. But I think it's important to have the conversation that they're not the same type of trade. Same thing that we just talked about in Starbucks. We're talking about a little bit longer term investment in that company where they're not buying the stock back. They're putting it into longer term ROI by putting that into R&D. So it's a little bit different. So I think it's kind of cool. When we talk about the best stocks to buy now, we have to make a distinction of what kind of strategy would give us conviction. Like, is it news? Is it earnings? Is it a CEO stepping down? Or is it a CEO coming back? Is it legislation that has to pass? So you need to know what the objective of that trade is based on the strategy that you're going into. So these kind of ideas has to pass the Senate. That's a big difference from I see order flow and I'm going to piggyback on top of that thing right now. So I wanted to give a little bit of a different context because we do have a lot of people who trade these kind of lower price stocks. And just because I don't trade them doesn't mean that you can't or shouldn't. I just wanted to give some insight into why I don't, because we get a lot of questions about it. And if we did look at it, I would need to see a little bit more than just one giant green candlestick. So what I want to show you now, also, I want to give you a chance to take a screenshot of this. This is the list of stocks that meet the perfect criteria coming into today, coming into Monday, April 4th. So let's just take a quick look at that. Let me get this off the screen. So you can see the list as of right now has 31 stocks. Now, I want to make a clear distinction here. This is a list of stocks that meet the perfect criteria over the last 21 trading days, or for the last 5 trading days, and Friday from the open. So it's changed from the open, changed from the previous close, percentage change over 5 days, and percentage change over 21 days. So we're hitting order flow in 4 different ways. That's a part of stacking the order flow and building that argument. Does not mean that they're perfect trades today because they might be too far from the optimal entry, but it does mean that stocks in that industry group and sector are seeing buying pressure. So this is really where now you need to dig just a little bit deeper and say, okay, these are ideas, but which ones are trades right now? And you need all that raw material, but there's another way to use this, which is breaking down which sectors have the most stocks that meet the perfect criteria. So you can see this 31, and they're basically broken down by percentage gain over the last 5 days. But we're going to go over here to sector, and we want to see if anything pops out in an obvious way where there is a group of stocks that have, and right now it looks like technology here is still dominating. This TOST keeps coming up in the list every day. ZS actually came up in our list as other stocks today. So we can actually take a quick look at that one. I believe it was just hovering right at the 50-period moving average, if I'm not mistaken. And just want to take a look. Yeah, so ZS is pretty interesting. 3-week rally, 4-week rally, and now hovering right at the 50. And you can see it's actually up $1.89 when we're looking at 285 as the next level. So that's the first obvious thing. Technology right now is still dominating this list. Energy not as strong, and the ones that are not really the household names that you would know. Healthcare we just talked about before. We looked at Lilly was a big one that we were keeping an eye on. That's an obvious one. But now we want to break this down a little bit more. We want to go into the industry groups. So we know these sectors. Now we want to break it down and see. So software infrastructure, which we all know a lot of those right now, NET, ZS, are cybersecurity stocks. So that's an interesting area to keep an eye on. So again, oil and gas, not the household names really that you would know. CPE, maybe. So basically going into today from a sector rotation perspective, and if we bring that up again over here, utilities and real estate, for me personally, not really the most active, reliable order flow and momentum. So I'm going to work my way down a little bit to consumer defensive and healthcare. Consumer cyclicals looking pretty good over the last month, and that's where you're going to find the Teslas and the electric vehicle stocks and that kind of thing. Basic materials, if you didn't happen to watch the video that we did over the weekend, we did a really big breakdown on sector rotation, but we took a little bit further, went outside the sectors, and we noticed that metals and miners were finding some bullish order flow. We'll take a quick look at those charts right now, just to give you some idea if you didn't happen to watch that video. So we're looking at XME, so you can see how clear that move to the upside is, and GDX, very similar on a breakout. So you break this down. So again, if you're not familiar with the way we do things with the stock market power pyramid, it starts out with the 3 major indices, then we go up to a sector, then we go to industry group, and then we go to individual stocks. So right now we're talking about a group, which is the metals and miners, and some of the ideas that we came up with in that group were AEM, and you can see right on a breakout level there as well, and NEM. Those were the top 2 that we were watching over in that group. So what I want to do right now, I'm going to put this back on the screen. I want to give you plenty of heads up so you can take a screenshot of that list of stocks that meet the perfect criteria. So let me put that up there for you again. So if you want, you could take a screenshot of that and you get an idea of which stocks are the strongest and which groups. So if you want, you can take a very quick snapshot of that. And then we'll come back over here and just map out the week. So what I'm looking for this week for me to have conviction is we're looking for the weekly chart to go well bid on the SPY and the NASDAQ, and specifically the NASDAQ. The NASDAQ has really been carrying the load. And I think specifically because of Apple. Apple was super strong. I think it was 19 days in a row, some crazy number like that. So NASDAQ and the S&P 500, they need to go well bid this week for me to start to have a little bit more conviction. But now you got to say to yourself, well, conviction, that means a couple of weeks we're going to hit all-time highs again. Is the market really that awesome? I'm going to say probably not, which means that I'm going to be looking to be hedging both sides of the market, where if I'm buying stocks, I might be buying inverse ETFs to hedge any good long positions. If the market starts to go down, I gave you a list before of the best stocks to short sell based on the fact that they already have bearish order flow heading into the day. And if you just happen to join the call right now, those stocks were financial stocks and home builder stocks, which is kind of interesting considering the fact that, you know, anybody selling a house right now, they're in heaven. They're selling it in a heartbeat and they're selling it for a lot more than they want. But I think it's interesting that the home builder stocks are all in bearish order flow right now and do not look like they're in good shape, while the housing sector is on fire. So it's pretty interesting right now. How is that leading it down? Is that saying something bigger about the housing market that is not here yet? So there's a lot of stuff going on, but hopefully if you're here with us every single day, every morning, Monday through Friday, we do these stock market lives. Come back tomorrow. Let's actually talk about this. Let's talk about how the market unfolds. Let me know in the comments below the video if you have any questions about anything we talked about or any stocks that you're watching that we didn't happen to talk about today. It'd be kind of fun to have that conversation as well. So obviously, thank you so much for joining me here today. If you're new to the channel, make sure you hit subscribe. And if this is the kind of stuff that you like, where we give these stock picks and everything like that, make sure you smash that like button. It's kind of like a vote to let me know what kind of topics you like. So have an awesome day, everybody. I really appreciate it. I will speak to you soon. Let's make it an awesome week.